once again, for everybody that didn't hear it before, you'll be able to control your audio settings. Chairman, you're free to proceed.
Okay, I would like to call to order this virtual regular meeting of the Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission, Friday, October 9th, 2020 at 2 p.m. First, as we move to the introduction of new members, I'd like to make some brief remarks. As we begin today's meeting, I would like to offer some remarks in the spirit of facilitating a smooth transition of the Planning Commission membership and officers. Any change brings opportunities, hazards, and the possibility of renewal. And with the structured terms of the PC, these changes are perennial. Today, we are introducing two new members of the PC, Michael Bryan and Brian Patterson. Both have very relevant experience and are quite interested in serving on this important commission and making the city of Rehoboth Beach an even better place to live, to visit, and to operate a business. Shortly, I will ask them to tell us a bit about themselves and invite all the PC members to introduce themselves and share a bit about their involvement in the community. With everyone's support, I will fill the responsibilities of the chair for today's meeting and the next regular meeting scheduled for November 13th. I'm also working very closely with the CDP consultant to maintain our momentum and keep the project on track to completion. I ask for the help of every PC member during this time so that we may continue to have productive meetings. Regarding a smooth transition, I have asked the former PC chair, Rick Perry, to attend today's meeting and participate in the discussions of old and new business today and lead several of the items. He has graciously agreed to do so. I'm grateful for Mr. Perry's generous leadership style as chair and his mentorship of me over the past year as vice chair. Mr. Perry has included me in every issue, and we have spoken about every agenda item and spoken nearly every week this past year to facilitate the orderly operation of the PC. I could not confidently say that I could step into the acting chair role for even one meeting without his support over the past year. This example of inclusive leadership and cooperative consultation is something that I hope everyone agrees makes serving the public worthwhile, and I intend to continue this model. After all of the current members of the PC introduce themselves, I will invite Mr. Perry to make some remarks as well. Finally, to our constituents, city staff and our legal advisor, the Board of Commissioners, the city manager, residents, visitors, business owners, and members of the public with an interest in Rehoboth Beach, we value your participation and ask you to continue to participate in PC discussions. I want to hear your suggestions and ideas. The times are always changing. Climate change, economic restructuring, pandemics, environmental and social justice movements, and the people affected by and working on such matters are also always in flux. We have a very powerful role as the city's planning commission to guide and advise on opportunities, conflicts, and risks for the city on the very broad subject of land use decisions. I know each of you will be both bold and be fair and do all you can to keep Rehoboth Beach a well-functioning and highly desirable place to visit and to live. Thank you for your service.
Jeff, I think you need to call the meeting to order before you go further.
Did I miss something?
Yeah, you need to call the meeting and get the attendance, and also if it was properly listed.
Oh, thank you. The roll call I was going to do next, Mike.
Okay, you got it.
Are we okay? Okay. I would now like to ask the secretary to call the roll.
Okay, I'm doing this in alphabetical order. Mr. Bryan.
I am present.
Are you there?
He said present.
He said present. Mr. Kaufman?
Present.
Ms. Lucier?
Present.
Ms. Matcha?
Present.
Mr. Patterson?
Present.
Mr. Strange?
Present.
Mr. Trunzo?
Present.
Myself, I'm present, obviously.
Lee,
Who's here?
you forgot Barry Covington. I'm
Did I
here.
forget Covington?
I'm here though.
Are you here?
Okay, so this is what I mean about working together. Let's keep it going. Okay. All right, so we've completed the roll call. Now I'll ask Ann Womack to do the verification of meeting notice, please. Ann, you might be muted.
The agenda for the Planning Commission regular meeting was posted in City Hall and on the city portal on October 2nd and was sent out from the portal on the same date. That's all I have, Vice Chair.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ann. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. And in the listing, you'll see all the minutes which are outstanding. There are two for us to consider today. They're the regular meetings held on July 10th, 2020 and August 14th, 2020. Am I correct, Ann, that no other meeting minutes have been distributed?
You are correct.
Thank you so much. So for this matter, has everyone had an opportunity to review these? So
Yes.
I think that's good. And I also wanted to note for everyone that I asked Mr. Hunker and Mr. Perry to review them since they were part of these meetings. And we did receive some comments from Mr. Perry, and Mr. Hunker was fine with them as they were written. Does anybody have anything to discuss with regard to the content?
Jeff, Michael Bryan, I would recuse myself from voting since I was not a member at that time.
So that's the other thing I need to say. Thank you for saying that, Michael. So for the new members today, when the meeting minutes are ready, Ann distributes them in an email to all of us. That's the usual method. We consider them, and when they're ready, they're usually quite timely. But of course, we've had a number of special meetings, so it all depends on Ann's workload.
Sure.
And if everyone's comfortable, I'm comfortable with abstaining being the right position for you today, as you didn't participate in those meetings.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Now I'm ready to consider a motion.
I move that we approve the two minutes. I don't know do I have to do separately or can I do them together?
I think we can do them together.
You can. All the six members are voting yes.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, and we have a second. So everybody in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any nays? And abstentions?
I abstain.
I abstain.
Okay, great. Item number 6 on the agenda, correspondence. Ann, have we received any correspondence?
No correspondence has been received.
Okay, thank you, Ann. So that takes us right into the old business. And old business, letter A, is the comprehensive development plan update. And
Jeff, did you want to introduce the new members first? Did you want to do that? You want to do that after that?
oh my goodness, thank you, Steve. Okay. Time out.
Okay.
So
I think I should have our introductions first.
yeah, I was really rolling. So let's do the introductions that I introduced earlier. So I will ask Mr. Bryan to speak first, Mr. Patterson, and then everyone else can go in whatever order you're comfortable. And thank you, Steve.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. I'm Michael Bryan. I'm from Winchester, Virginia. That's our western base, although we've been here since 1999, my family and myself. My day job is I'm a lawyer in Winchester. I primarily represent community banks and governmental entities there, generally real estate related. And we simply think it's wonderful to be here and have enjoyed it. And I'm hopeful that I can be of help and service to you guys.
Thank you. Brian?
Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm Brian Patterson, and my home base is in Davidsonville, Maryland, which is between Annapolis and Washington. And I'm a lawyer also at the International Monetary Fund in DC, which has nothing to do with real estate. But I've had a home in Rehoboth, second home, since 2000. And I've been involved in planning and zoning in Rehoboth going back to 2006 with the old Architectural Review Board Task Force. And then I was on the Planning Commission from 2009 to 2018. And have just always enjoyed it and been involved in some interesting major subdivisions like the Oak Grove Motor Court, and work on the interesting ordinances like the Lake Buffers Ordinance. I was the primary drafter of that. And the tree ordinance provisions, which have not been adopted, but we did a lot of work on back in 2013, 2015. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone else, please?
Why don't you go alphabetically like we did with our introductions? That was fun.
Oh, okay. So who would that bring up? Barry next?
Probably me. Barry Covington. I'm a full-time resident here in Rehoboth Beach. My background is both legal and business. This is just completed my first year on the planning board, and looking forward to working with everyone in the future.
Thanks, Barry. Would that be you next, Steve?
I guess so. Does that mean next, Lee?
Kaufman.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, obviously, I'm Steve Kaufman. My wife and I, Sharon, we've had a house here in Rehoboth since 1992. I don't live here permanently. My background is for 45 years, I practiced municipal and land use law with a major law firm in the Washington metropolitan area. This is my second year on the Planning Commission, and I'm very much interested in helping the city adopt this new comprehensive development plan. And also, if I can say, move into what I consider to be the 21st century and our future. And I'm looking forward to work with all the other members of the commission.
Thanks, Steve. I think Joyce is next.
I'm Joyce Lucier, and I'm a full-time resident in Rehoboth, and have been, I think, since about the year 2000. My background is in academia for many years, and living in DC, I was interested in some politics, but coming down here, I became involved pretty much around 1998, 99, and look forward to working with Brian again, and also with Michael. So glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce. Rachel, are you able to talk?
I am. Hi,
Great.
everyone. This is Rachel Matcha, and I'm thrilled to be with everybody again today. I've really enjoyed the last year working on the Planning Commission with this group. We're certainly going to miss Rick and Mark rolling off this great committee, but I do believe that we made a ton of progress, and I expect that we will continue to make a ton of progress as we come down the home stretch here on the CDP. By way of introduction, I've been a homeowner here in Rehoboth for about 20 years, lived here full-time for the last 2.5, going on 3 years. I have 5 children, 4 in college, and have just really enjoyed, again, being on this committee and also supporting the Park, Shade, and Tree Commission as well. So I'm happy to work with you all as we go forward as a team.
Thank you, Rachel. Mike?
My name is Mike Strange. My background is rather eclectic, to say the least. I've been a homeowner in Rehoboth Beach since 1988, and know Brian quite well because he took over when I had my heart attack as the deputy to the director at that point in time, and thank you. And I look forward to him working with us again, and as well as working with Michael. I think it makes a very good team. And we have a lot of capability and a lot of responsibility.
Thanks, Mike. Lee, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Lee Weber. I currently live in Washington, D.C. with my wife and a 13-year-old son. I did grow up in Rehoboth, and I've owned my own home there for years, and we try to spend. I just recently retired from my 30 real estate development, specifically here in DC. I've done some as well. I also think we've made and
Having a hard time hearing.
Yes, I can't hear him.
can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better. You may have faded out.
I may have faded out.
So I
So,
want to repeat a little bit of it. Okay. Yeah.
So I think we've made great progress on the CDP, and I look forward to working with the new members and some fresh perspectives on the CDP and to completing it in the near future.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lee. I'm Jeff Trunzo. I live in Tacoma Park, Maryland. I'm still working full-time at the Food and Drug Administration. I've been a visitor to Rehoboth since 1986 and an owner since 1992. And I have lots of different interests. I help run the Main Street organization here in Tacoma. I got my first taste of Rehoboth service on the Mayor's Advisory Committee on Trees, and caught the bug and volunteered for this committee, and to my surprise, I was chosen. And here we are today. It's been interesting. It's been thrilling. I think this committee, for the 2 years that I've been on it, has contributed a lot to Rehoboth Beach. The Comprehensive Development Plan is a huge responsibility, and we've had quite a few surprises thrown at us this year with the pandemic, but I think we've handled them beautifully. We've done so much work. We'll be talking about that very shortly. I always hesitate at this part. I'm happy to be leading during this transition part. It is a lot of responsibility and a lot of work to pull it off successfully. I apologize for the fumbles on the agenda, but I'm doing my best, and I know if we work together, we'll get through it very successfully. So with that, I've asked Mr. Perry if he would like to make some transitional comments as well, and I hope he'll be able to do that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you very much for extending the invitation for me to participate in today's meeting, and in particular to help with the transition that you are undertaking. Welcome back, Brian, and welcome, Michael. I've worked with Brian in the past, but Michael, I don't think we've ever met, but we do have something in common. We're both apparently banking lawyers. And Brian is a lawyer. Glenn, I am so sorry for you. You did not fare well in this transition because you've gone from 3 to 1 to 4 to 1.
Yes, I know.
So to all the lawyers on the Planning Commission, keep him in check, please.
Yeah, room for error.
I just, first of all, want to thank Jeff for his very kind remarks and words about me and the role that I played as chair for the last year. Let me assure you, I could not have done it without his assistance. fortunately, we had a great working relationship together, and we were able to move things forward despite some of the obstacles that were thrown in our path and the need to, weave and bob a little bit as the pandemic, threw a few of our plans, to the roadside. But we came up with ways to get around those things and still make progress. The one thing I have to compliment is everyone that I served with on the Planning Commission. You're just remarkable individuals and truly dedicated public servants. Your willingness to work as hard as you did, even through the pandemic, taking on individual responsibilities for various aspects of the CDP, doing your organization interviews, continuously providing input and suggestions to Jeff and myself, is just remarkable and just says a lot about not only your character, but also your commitment to the city of Rehoboth Beach. And so I will miss working with you on a regular basis, but rest assured, I think you might be hearing from me from time to time. And Mike Strange, I am waiting to hear if there's anything else in your background beyond the fire chief that I learned about. I mean, almost every meeting I discover that he's had yet another incredible, professional experience. And with that, I just wish you all the best of luck. And Debbie, it has been wonderful working with you. I'm glad that, when I became chair, that along with Jeff, you and Jeff and I were able to reset the work on the CDP. And I think in the last year, we have made tremendous progress, as Jeff noted earlier. And I am confident that you will all continue to work together collaboratively and collectively, as well as provide your individual efforts, to bring that to fruition on a timely basis and develop a plan that will benefit our city for residents as well as for commercial business. The pandemic has had a tremendous impact on our city. We're seeing restaurants already start to close. We're seeing retail businesses start to close. Based on the conversations that I've been having, there are many more to come. And so the Planning Commission really has an integral and important role to play in formulating the future of our city, not only to ensure that the residents have a vibrant and well-funded community to live in, but also that we have a vibrant commercial district that will support the city. So I wish you all well. I invite any of you to contact me at any time if you'd like to discuss issues or want my input. I live here full time, so if I can ever be of any help, don't hesitate to ask. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. We really appreciate your contribution and those very kind remarks, and I think they're extremely helpful for transitioning the committee to this new annual term. Thank you. So now, hopefully nobody will raise their hand that I'm doing something wrong, but now we're moving to old business. 7A, the Comprehensive Development Plan. So as the members know, I've spoken to everybody individually, but at our last meeting, we agreed that we would delve into the content of a chapter or chapters more fully so that we could get a better feel of what the CDP is going to look like, how it all works together, why the mapping issue is important, and get a feel for where we are today in terms of the timeline. So Debbie, Rick, and I talked on Wednesday. I asked Rick to join me in the call, and we mapped out how to present the information today, and Debbie is going to lead us through that. So thank you, Debbie.
Thank you. Max, is this where you would like me to share my screen at this time?
That's correct.
Okay, let's see which one I've got. I will get this up just 1 minute. I would like to say, Commissioner Jeff, if I'm able to say one comment, and that is that I have appreciated very much so working with Commissioner Mark Hunker. He was very responsive in his information. And I really want to give some kudos to Rick and Jeff. We really developed a great professional relationship with good communication, coordination, and everything that we needed to do. It was great as well. They really helped me understand the local needs, and I got to bring probably a larger presence, I think, on regional or county or state. So thank you, Rick, Jeff, and Mark. And Rick, you were amazing to be able to work with. I appreciate the communication, the professionalism, and bringing me in as part of your team versus separate teams. So thank you very much for that. And with that, I'm going to do the presentation.
Now, I don't see the presentation yet. Is it just me?
No, I'm not.
Here it is.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
Do you see the presentation or the agenda? That's the one question I have.
Present.
Presentation.
Lead slide.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. The dry run was a little rough for Jeff and Rick this week, so I appreciate it. So what I wanted to do first was welcome new commissioners and in their capacity, and I've appreciated all the work we've done with commissioners. They've worked very hard. You've been very, very resourceful and done your homework in a timely manner collectively as well. So all of our presentations for the previous board members should either be on the agenda on the city's website or in the CDP special section. So is there anything you want to be caught up in? Just run it through Jeff or your, who you assign as your chair, and let me know if you need previous presentations or previous information. We can share that with you at any time. So today we're here to give you a plan preview and a project update. Next slide. So I'm going to go a little bit slower for the newer commissioners. We actually have a 4-phase project scope, and really we've been stuck on phase 3 for a while, and that is due to some different hurdles we had with mapping, the COVID. We had some great workshops lined up, which you'll be able to read in the comprehensive plan as far as outreach. So we're still at the plan input and draft internal document. We're further, I feel like I can half color that in at this point, but then you can't see number 3. So then we go to a plan presentation and public comment. So we're in number 3 until the planning commissioners and the city staff feel comfortable before this goes out to the public. So today what we're going to do is we promised a preview of some of the, some of the writing that we have within the chapters and how it's laid out. We have, it is a work product of KCI and a work product of the city. It's following the format that's prescribed by the state of Delaware, Office of State Planning Coordination. That way, we follow their requirements by their chapters. It's very easy for the 24 to 26 agencies to review the document and provide comments. And it's very user-friendly for the public to be able to use as far as organizations and the Planning Commission, as well as staff. So you'll see we have 14 chapters, once again laid out by titles, driven by state planning for review and jurisdiction. And the great thing about the way this format runs is in previous comprehensive plans, and not just Rehoboth, but several different municipalities, that we've gone through the 3rd reiteration of them now, kind of started where the documents just go all over the place. So pulling this information, if you want to know specifically about housing or specifically about economic development, you can pull that chapter, and then you can pull the implementation as well. So I think you'll find the format very easy once we kind of go through the snapshot today of the plan. And what I'm going to do is give you a quick preview of the first chapter, which is the introduction. The introduction chapter goes into subcategories such as acknowledgements, authority to plan, and you've seen that some of that wording in previous submittals, presentations about where do we get our authority to plan, who says the Planning Commission has this as a law, what does the state govern, what does the commissioners, what does the Planning Commission have? That information is all in there, and we cite Delaware Code. And I think what's really important is the comprehensive development plan history. You cannot move forward if you, in where you want to go if you don't know where you've been and what progress you've made. So I think this is the first document you have where you have the history laid out of what was done, what were some goals, what's been completed. And then we go into, which is required once again by the state, to go into what was the plan process for 2020. So with that, these are screenshots and they might be a little difficult to read, and everything in yellow we highlight because this changes in our document until we get to the public. So we know boards, commissions, staff, government, they can all be changed by the time we actually hit the street with the draft versus the internal. So you're going to see a little bit of yellow highlight in there. This is really important, we feel, to give credit to where credit is due, meaning there's a lot of people it takes to be able to write this document. And there's a lot of people, such as yourself, as commissioners, that have taken the time to be able to do it. So I do not want to discount anybody's time, energy, and comments. And this is the first time the community organizations are actually listed out in here. And the last plan, they did include them as well. They did some interviews as well. So somewhat the format for, I just gave you some snapshots. The next chapter goes into the plan history, or into chapter 1, which we started in 1996, which is as far back to the records we could find. And then it goes to 2002, and we pull up the category and the goals and the visions. And then we actually had a 2010, and it goes into what was adopted, what the procedure was, how many public comments, how many people attended meetings. This is great because the other thing in Rehoboth you'll learn by reading this section specifically is how much the people are getting involved in this process. Your community, your organizations, other groups, other committees and other staff areas within the city. You go from a workshop that had 24 to surveys that have 250. So people are getting more and more involved in documents like this because there are law. It is the law for planning. So people start paying attention once they know it's a law. And this gives goals and guidelines. So remember, the laws and the requirements after this are things that you'll be developing in your implementation. We go on a little bit further, and this, I just wanted to cut out a part of the public participation because we've heard some comments in the past, like things aren't moving or maybe we're not reaching enough people. When you actually look, and I quantified this and had to write this chapter, there has been a lot of outreach. There's been double, it will be triple by the end, meetings from our first scope that we wrote for the project. So we have a city data questionnaire. You'll see the SWOT is going to be in there. The surveys that were completed, business, visitor, community, lessons learned on the surveys, and the expos. How we really laid the expos up, and we're really excited. Once we all got on board, we were really excited about the expos. And then with the pandemic, we of course could not hold those. So this is very important by the state because we have to prove the outreach. We have to prove it's not necessarily a priority of who we've proven to, it's that we have included everybody, we haven't given everybody an opportunity. So that is what's kind of caught also in chapter 1. We have the organizational interviews, the public meetings. So it's very interesting that by the time we get to adoption, we'll have 26. I envision that to be between probably 30 and 32. So when you look at what's been done in the past, about the same type of meetings have been done, but we look as far as the meetings that are being conducted, and the minutes are online. So what's changed in 10 years is accessibility. Minutes are online, presentations are online, agendas are online. All this information is transparent, open government, where anybody that wants to be involved can find out how we've moved forward in the process. So the other thing we've done, and this is a new format I think you're really going to like, we kind of talked about it with state planning. We've heard comments from the Planning Commission over and over, and I agree 100%. When we took the survey information, we have to make sure that we have taken that and put that in the document. The format, on the bottom of every chapter that is required by the state, we have a community participation input. It'll have a logo, an icon, just with the people there. And this chapter I just showed was land use. So we put, what did the community business and visitor surveys have to say about land use? What did the organizational interviews have to say about land use? So if you're in that chapter, it's great because then you can see what did the community say, what did the organization say, and then that goes right into our goals. So right below this section, you're going to find the goals and action items. We've tweaked this with several communities. We're on just in the last 2 years, I'm on my 5th adoption of comp plans for municipalities, just in 2 years. So we like to do the chapter, land use goals. Then the first thing is, what is the goal of that chapter? So goal 11, which is a chapter -1. but what's the action item of the goal? And this is going to help several of you where we probably had the most frustration in providing those goals is once we see the final goal, what action items do we want to take? So I anticipate to see comments once you see this written out a little bit more in your chapters. So this would be at the bottom of every chapter. And then where it says the goals, we talked about that matrix would be at the very end of the document. So the Planning Commission chair each year is responsible prior to July of sending a report to the mayor and commissioners of what's been done, progress, what is to be completed every year. And then it goes to the Office of State Planning Coordination. So this is not a shelved product. This is a document that actually has to be reviewed and accountable. We will have all of those in a matrix, and there will be another column that says underway, ongoing, not complete, etc. So it'll be a great matrix you can look at any time throughout the year. And if you remember right, we talked about making sure this is part of the budget every year, so you have money to do certain projects to keep moving forward. So with that, I just want to show you a little bit of chapter 2. The subcategories are the location, history, your physical conditions, climate, population, your racial profile, your age, and your education. Once again, we did not select these. They were required by the state. So you've seen several of this demographic information when we revealed the data quite a long time ago, it feels like. So you'll see this is the layout of the community profile. We have the location, we'll put a map in there, the history, which we'll be living a little bit more with new data, and population. So you'll see those tables, charts, and graphs now have relatable information. We can now quantify what went up, what went down, what stayed the same. And we also put that disclaimer in there. Because remember when we divulged the census data and several of us were like, I'm not sure that that's right. That's the data that we have between the state, the county, and the census information is the quantifiable data that we can go ahead and put out there now. You'll see we've included all of those tables and charts you've seen before and information leading up to it. So that's a snapshot I gave you of the community profile at this time. Then we go into the city and community services. This is quite a large section. So this is a great section for Main Street to be able to use, or any organizations that are trying to get funding, or somebody moving new to the community and they want to know how they can be involved. This addresses the city council, boards, commissions, and committees, the city operations, so everybody actually knows who does what, and the community organizations. We have started putting a disclaimer in there that this is a snapshot of time right now. So at any time, the city council, boards, and the committees especially could change. Options could be restructured. Community organizations can change as well. So we are putting the website of every organization throughout the document as well, because once again, this is a snapshot of when we collected the data. Very good kudos to the planning commissioners for getting in the format we requested, getting the information back on the organizations. For the ones that took time to do it, we get some really good information. So here's some of the format for what you see here. We ran them in alphabetical order. So the first one we have is the Animal Issues Committee. We definitely let everybody know that there's a website for the city to go through and find everything. But when they filled out their document, it was great because they actually put down initiatives that have been complete. What does the committee plan to do in the future? So those that interviewed this organization understand that this is vital information, and we may have the same initiatives and goals throughout the document. We've then taken this information and put it into specific chapters. So for example, if we have a goal of theirs that maybe belongs in the environmental section or the transportation section, we pulled that over in that community organization and survey tab at the bottom. So this is more informational driven, that I think you'll find throughout the document. And that goes into several pages. We have several great pictures. We just took those out for content snapshot purposes. And then housing is another one. So in housing, the requirements we have is the profile of the housing for Rehoboth, occupancy, the household size, the housing age, your affordability and challenges. And then we also put housing rehabilitation and related assistance. I feel that that chapter is probably less applicable to Rehoboth, but it may be to some areas. So we always want to be able to market, support any kind of housing assistance that can be related. And it can be from fixing up, cottages that maybe haven't had proper property maintenance. So here's a snapshot of that. See the demographics and population information and occupancy information from the census. So we have a profile. And as you are aware in our previous presentations, we have compared you to local municipalities around you, to the county, to the state, and then come up with the census data on housing stock and occupancy as well. So you'll see in this housing chapter as well, we talk about challenges, if they have overcrowding, housing units based on population, and your seasonal, we really have played a lot on seasonal. And I got to thank Mike when we talked about this because, as Mike Strange is familiar with, jurisdictions pick a percentage number of seasonal, and that's what they go with for statistics. So we pulled in what we could from the county, what we could from some neighboring jurisdictions to do the seasonal population, and we'll be able to see differences in there. We go through the assistance programs that people could be able to be eligible for, as we do it with the Sussex County to promote their programs as well. They put great input in that for us. And then we go into the mapping update. So I just wanted to show you a couple chapters and how it's formed. And if you look at what we've done, we would find something in land use that maybe has to go back into housing, or the community organizations that have to go through the rest of the chapters. So it's very difficult to feed you one chapter at a time when it goes actually throughout the entire document and is read back and forth. And the other thing is we get the document to one author. Meaning I have several different departments and divisions that look at this and go through the information. We have the county submit this information, the state submits this information, but you want it to flow as in you have one overseeing author, which is where we're at right now. We heard you the last meeting, which was really actually great. When we talked about the mapping, we have all the map types on the left-hand side that we discussed. And in meeting with Jeff and Rick, at the last discussion and working with Max, who's been very good, and we'll work with the building licensing department, we are going to add a redevelopment map. We will work with the city staff on how far back we can go. We're recommending 2010, but we'll look at records. We would like to map out the approved redevelopment projects or new development projects and the ones that you're currently hearing that are under review. Because as you're aware, the role in the Planning Commission has increased quite a bit. There's a lot of redevelopment activity. There's a lot of new development activity. So we're going to go ahead and map this and look at having a chart in there of actually what it was. I think that will also help you when you look at your projects in the future to be able to see what's around it. Sometimes you only see that piece of property, but let's see what's going on around the property as well. So that'll be a great tool. We took your recommendation and we added that map. We'll be working with the city staff over the next 2 weeks to develop that. As far as the other mapping analysis, this is where we compared, we took the city and the county parcel data, and great, Max did a wonderful job in finding that what we feel we need some county assistance on were parcel lines, maybe things weren't recorded in time. So you always do what you're going to call a housekeeping analysis. So between the city, the county, the state, and KCI, we've had a couple of conference calls. We analyzed the difference between the two maps, and we finished that October 5th. We sent that to Max to go ahead and provide comments if it was a split, if it was something that happened way before any of us were here. Once we finish that with the city, we send that to the county, and the county will then go into their records and look at their deeds, their plats, what's been recorded, so we can go ahead and identify to make sure our maps, because the county hosts all the parcel maps, that all the maps match from first map, which we've gone over with you before, all the way down to the county. So once the county helps us out with that assistance, which they know that we are a high priority to want to get this done, but we're also at the leisure of their staff to do the homework. This is where once they get done, we'll be looking at having a meeting with Glenn and the staff, the building and licensing staff, to say, okay, do we have any kind of issues with any of these? Has everything been recorded as requested by the Planning Commission and approved? And if not, do we have to dig a little further with title searches? Once we know that step, we can get things clarified and reworked in the system. We send that off to First Map. And after First Map does their update, between 7 and 10 days, we will have the creation of all of your maps completed and the data to put into the text. So that's where we're at right now. We worked very quickly on this analysis once it was brought to our attention. and the city staff's been great. The county has been, for the first time, honestly, in a long time, they have been so willing to be able to help us with this research and discrepancies. So that's where that project lies. We will be giving you an update at the next meeting, and I'll be keeping Jeff, Rick, and whoever's assigned as the Planning Commission chair in the loop on this process and the timeline. And I'll be at your next meeting to give you an update. So that is moving forward. It involves a lot of moving parts. So with that being said, we have had continual communication with Office of State Planning Coordination. They are giving every municipality a 6-month automatic extension if they apply for it and can prove where they're at in the process, which means we could ask for a 6-month extension, meaning the city manager would need to write a letter as we did last time by mid-October, which would probably be next week. And I do not anticipate the 6 months, but right now we have an extension until January. What we do not want to do in this process, which I'll allude to in the next slide, is shorten any review time at all. So that 6 months would carry us from January through roughly July or August. We don't think it's going to be that long, but if they're willing to offer municipalities, it's a strong recommendation you do it, because we will not be able to make January if we're going to the mapping for October, the beginning of November. And I also don't recommend we release any data over the holidays other than potentially to the Planning Commission. So we're looking for an extension request of 6 months for that. If we need it, for 6 months or 4 months or 3 months, 6 is better than none. And once again, as I stated, November 13th, talked to Jeff and Rick about attending the Planning Commission meeting. So we don't have any special meetings up until that point. We would go ahead and do a comment review overview. So what we'd like to go over the next meeting is how would you get your comments back to us on the document? What options we have? Prefer track changes? Do you prefer the spreadsheet? So I'd like to really go through that, since we have some downtime there, to go through how do you like to provide comments and what's the best way to catalog all of those, and give you a project update as well. So that's what's on our task as a consultant, November 13th. In the meantime, anything else that's come out new, we had a couple documents that were new last month. We've continually updated your document. If I get something from the state next week, we update your document. So you will have the latest and greatest that we can give you by the time it actually gives something to someone. So you've seen these next slides. So this is what happens next. Once we get through the mapping, that internal draft release, we're waiting on that date. We have 2 weeks turnaround time. When we can get this schedule defined, we'll look at the holidays for you, because we could run into some of those. And then we do the comments. We prepare everybody's comments. We give them back to you and say, here's all the changes and the recommendations for the draft update. Do we have more work to do? Are we comfortable? And then is it a scope schedule or a scope change at all in any way? As we've all talked about, will be the pivotal moment of how you feel with the document and your comfort level. And that will be at the Planning Commission and the city staff as an internal document, so you can provide comments before we release the document. After that, we do the draft plan presentation once again to the city commissioners community. And that process is exactly the same as I presented, I think, the last maybe 3 times. So our scope's still the same on the back end of this. And then after that, we go through the remaining tasks of the public comment period, intergovernmental coordination, state plus, public hearing, and adoption. And now I would like to open it up to comments, and once again, offer the 2 new commissioners, Patterson and Bryan. If any questions, we usually just run through the commission chair, and I'm willing to share any information or any previous presentations if you'd like to see them.
Debbie, first I'd like to say thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive update, and the information went by very quickly. Even for me, who's seen it earlier in this week, I noticed things that I didn't see before. So I'd like to go to the Planning Commission members first and have people's reactions, questions, whatever. I see Joyce's hand raised.
Yes, Debbie, I thought it was the outline I liked very, very much. I just had a couple of questions. First, are you going to be sending us anything now?
We are not. Those tables and charts from the maps, we need that information to be able to finish writing the rest of the chapters, and
Okay.
we're doing updates. So not until we feel comfortable that the document as a whole should be released. And there's a couple reasons. One, I don't want you to have to read it 3 and 4 times. We don't want to have 5 and 6 reiterations out there in the scope we did to draft.
Okay, all right, I get that.
I'd like it to be as wrapped in a bow for you as possible.
All right, I have 2 questions then.
Okay.
One, and I don't know where it was, but it was early on. There was something, and you had something called racial profile.
Yes.
What is that?
So the state requires us to have racial profile. It's not the social injustice type of racial profile. It is graphics of how people filled out their census data, if they are Latino or Hispanic, African American, a white Caucasian. So that is what we call the profile of the race within the city.
How do
And
you
those
know
are the
what that is?
That's from the census data.
But do you have access to that? You have to go to every person's?
No, so when the census data came out in 2010, for those that filled it out, it populated like all of those other charts we
So
have.
they do it together.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
All right.
So that way we don't feel we'll be in trouble or you'll be in trouble.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had was, I liked that at the end with the goals and the action, you know, what you're going to do. Is there any way that you see from your experience of rating or prorating or whatever the goals? I mean, if there's something on animal control that's not quite equal to climate change, which could be immediate, do you have different rating system? You know, this is most important. This has to be done.
That is a great question. So in the past, probably the first comprehensive plan, there was no priorities. First, everybody's run. Second one, it started to be a couple priorities, but we learned on the second one when we start for all the municipalities, when we put in those priorities and the funding came out for it, it could have been a low priority, and the funding came out of the blue from the federal government EPA, and you could have lost funding to another municipality that made it a high. So each year, what we recommend is not prioritizing these because there's a couple things involved. What your goals are this year may not be the same as next year. Who would have thought the pandemic would have involved some new goals? We also know that you're going to need money to do it. So every year in the budget, we recommend the commission go through all of those goals, select the ones they'd like to focus on, submit to the city commissioners because you're going to need budget money to be able to do it, or a grant. A lot of this is going to have to be done outside or inside. You'll determine that.
And you leave that up to the planning commission to do that?
They do we put in this document that one thing we heard over and over from the planning commission was maybe the disconnect from the other committees.
Yeah, a lot.
City commissioners. So one recommendation we have once a year, we feel at a minimum, the chairs of all the committees and the mayor and the city manager should get together and talk about what they'd like to work on collectively in the next upcoming year. But each chair should bring it back to the planning commission to say, what do we think is our priority? Can we get a grant? Do we have skills within our organization? Do we have to outsource it? So since that can be changed so fluidly, we think it should be done in the annual budget process, which means you start that probably right after your annual report, which is a good time to do it. So we do not prioritize those because we don't want you to lose funding money as well.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could add on one thing to Joyce's very first comment, we have had a number of special meetings, and we had talked about reserving a date later in October before the mapping situation was discovered. As you saw on that slide, there's about a half dozen steps that have to happen. And Debbie and the city staff and the county have made unbelievable progress quickly on moving us along. So I'm very optimistic we're going to move quickly, but we're clearly not going to have a special meeting in October. So at the end of the agenda, we'll get to the meeting schedule, but there will not be another meeting until November. And I see Mike's hand.
Yeah, one comment with regard to Debbie, that you said a 6-month extension that is capable. And even though we're driving to do this and have it completed much earlier than that, Do you need does that require a formal motion by us or a request to Sharon Lynn, who I see is on the call as well, that be done immediately if everyone on the Planning Commission is agreement with that? I think it's essential to do that because there's so many unknowns right now in our society, the pandemic and other issues, that we really should have that as a hold card just in case something really goes to hell, quite frankly.
So we had a transition meeting with Rick Perry, Jeff, myself, Sharon, Evan, Mayor, Stan Mills, and we talked about this, and we all agreed that we'd like to move forward with the extension. We did extension previously in the Planning Commission, but if I recollect, I don't think we voted, we just did it.
Okay.
We drafted a letter for Sharon to be able to submit, so unless we hear something that the Planning Commission is adamantly against it, we'd like to move forward in getting her the draft Monday to be able to format that and send that off.
Okay.
Yeah, we're planning to handle that administratively,
Yes.
unless there would be a vigorous opposition today.
Great.
Okay, Stephen Kaufman. Steve, you're muted. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
First, Debbie, thanks so much for the presentation. I thought it was very good.
Thank you.
I'm very glad that you added this redevelopment map. I had a question about that, and then I have one other question. Is that map essentially going to just identify areas of potential redevelopment? Is that what we're talking about?
What are, we're trying to kind of give a layup here because we're spending quite a bit of time on this mapping. What we thought we'd do is, as you shade it for a zoning map, we thought we would do 2 categories or 3, and how many we get back. So there would be a table within that map that would show the map and parcel address and what it was, as well as shaded where it's located on the map. So one could be, for example, if Dogfish. So one would be color to change, we'd say, from vacant building to Dogfish Head Brewing Restaurant. So you put that in the parcel layout and then in a table as well.
And so how does that differ from the zoning map? What would the zoning map show?
The zoning map has the true zoning parcel based.
So that's the actual zoning that exists in the city today.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I'm very pleased that you added this redevelopment because I'm sure we'll develop some action items from that.
Absolutely.
That would be a good.
That was a great recommendation for the Planning Commission.
Brian, you're muted.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Debbie. Yeah, I fully concur. It was a really great presentation, and but even better than the presentation, with all respect, the slides look really good. The snippets from the chapters are really impressive and detailed and factual, and it's very reassuring. It greatly reduced my anxiety level about where we were. And then also I fully support the 6 months extension, although I hope we don't get anywhere near that. One additional question I have and a little point of anxiety is the state planning office, you know, they have this checklist and what they want is for a number of items, they want to know the city's position on this thing and that thing, like position on housing growth and position on redevelopment. And Rehoboth, our previous CDPs, you know, we had goals, and the goals were, you know, a little bit, they were very aspirational, a little bit vague, a little bit nuanced, and avoided conflict.
Yes.
With the way they were worded. So I guess my question is, you know, what's the strategy this time? Because, you know, if we, you know, as lawyers, when we talk about position, it's clear this planning office is looking for specificity. But the more specific we get, the more likely we're going to have conflict and delay, et cetera. And so I was just curious, generally, because what I see on the slides that you showed is the factual stuff, but then presumably there's position stuff. But just generally, what's the strategy going to be?
Yeah, so I think that's a great point because we tested out a couple different towns with different methods. The municipalities that I've worked for in the past that went very, very specific, we have found it's been used against them in applications where they've gone one extreme way and said, we want mixed use development. And then all of a sudden there's a banner out there somewhere that says this municipality only wants mixed use. So they had groves and groves and groves, and all of a sudden, their capacity couldn't handle the transportation. So we try to speak, I hate to say it this way, but as far as the overall higher arching policy, we like to be as vague as possible in that, to work through it with the goals, because what we found with Rehoboth is the lack of probably supportive demographic material in the previous documents. You have so many tables, charts, the requirements now that help you make that decision. So you're going to have to, in implementation, you may have to start and come and say, now that you know your snapshot of housing, which I'm not sure you really did before, like how many have been demoed, how many have been reconstructed, how many do you have with this many bedrooms, et cetera, how many are vacant. I think you have that gives you enough to make the policy. So we have a general policy that you'll see in there that we feel is passing the sniff test. It says, we welcome all age, race, income levels for affordable housing, et cetera. And then that's your guide. But then at the bottom of it, your goals and your action items, I think we're still learning what you want by the data you're being supported, which could require more feasibility studies, more reports. Probably the easiest one is the mixed use development. There's a lot of comments to go for mixed use, but when people talk about mixed use, is it citywide? Is it 2 blocks? Is it 1 block? So that was a higher priority from the public and the Planning Commission overall. One of the goals would be to further review, investigate, and prepare feasibility studies to determine the appropriate pros and cons of going to mixed use with the proper guidance. The action item could be to, first of all, do an existing conditions analysis. What do you have? You already have some mixed use. What's the hurdles? Is it parking? Is it dumpsters? Is it access, etc.? So I think if that helps allude a little bit more of how we're kind of doing the tiers, we really haven't gotten into a point where we can make one definitive determination. And please chime in, any planning commissioners, where we can make one definitive determination at this point, because you haven't seen it wrapped collectively together to steer one way or another just about in any topic, other than protect the environment, the same higher level ones. That answers that in a roundabout way.
Okay, Michael Bryan.
Yes. Will we have, and if this is too much of a digression, we can do it at another time by phone call or whatever. But you mentioned that priorities are somewhat linked to funding. And will we as a commission have the information available to tell us what grants are available, what funding is available, whether it's through the federal, the local, whatever government? Is there somebody within the city that does the grant writing and can provide us that information so that can help with the prioritization of what the goals are?
That's another great question. I can tell you Rehoboth is really, really really good at getting grants from all state agencies to the federal government and for other neighboring municipalities collectively. So we're very good at getting grants, but you also have other resources. Glenn knows about funding opportunities that come up. Myself as your planner on this project has opportunities where I've gotten other grants for other things. You have engineers as well as your staff. Now, we don't provide our business plan of grants for this people to use, but you'll find that all of your consultants, especially with COVID and the budget probably losing some revenues, will come out of the woodwork to try to get additional money for you for projects. But the city's very good at that. We'll be identifying those. We'll be identifying the needs for grant funding throughout that. So if you choose, hypothetically, if you get your annual report out in July, and maybe in September or October, you start talking collectively about, we would like to go for the mixed use this year. We want to write a mixed use. We want to get a feasibility study. We want to write some regulation. First thing the city's going to do is start to look for calling us or starting to look for funding for that topic that you want.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else on the Planning Commission? Okay, so I think we should go to the public now for this topic. And I wonder, I see Commissioner Susan Gay. Do you have anything to say on this topic?
Yeah, let me unmute. Am I muted? No, I'm
You're good. We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, first of all, for letting me comment. And I want to say the presentation, Debbie, was excellent.
Thank you.
You know, ever since and it was great to see the sample chapters. It's very, very helpful. And at the last meeting where you presented that information about the maps, I have to tell you, I've been salivating over those maps ever since. And I do think that will be a very valuable part of the plan. But in addition to that, today, and I learned that when you've got all the information in there about city and community services and organizations, and I think that will also be a very positive addition to the plan, because people coming into town do want to know, where they can help, what organizations we have that can be part of it. I just think it makes for a very it's a detail that should be there. So thank you for including that. I have three comments and questions, I guess. One relates to the comment period and the review period, where you talk about, I guess, a 2-week review period, then it coming back to the Planning Commission, and then having a joint meeting with the commissioners at that point. And I'm reminded that at the very beginning, the kickoff meeting, that it was in December, I don't know, 18, I guess. Our homework from that meeting was for both the commissioners and the planning commissioners to do the SWOT analysis. That was a big part of that came out of that meeting. And so I'm wondering if, if the comments are all coming from the Planning Commission now, and then the document is revised before it's presented to the commissioners, I wonder if there's going to be some duplication, that's going to slow us down. In other words, I wonder if it's more efficient to have the comments of the commissioners and the Planning Commission at the same time. Again, I say that both because that's the way we did it in the beginning with the SWOT analysis, but it's also a way to make it more efficient since time is of the essence. So that's the first question.
Okay, so that's also a good comment. The reason that we wrote our scope initially like that was we did want the data up front from everybody. We also did joint meetings on any data surveys, demographics. So those were prominent areas. As you're aware, this is a task of the Planning Commission. And what we looked at in the scope when we scoped this out for 5 scoping meetings was to say, planning commissioners and staff, can we get to this to the best of our level so we're actually not wasting the time of the commissioners and the public? Can we get this document where we feel we're all very comfortable before we release it, and having it when I have more than the commissioner, more than the city staff, I have the same redundancy comments back during that level, more so than I do the second round. So we've tested this out in the jurisdictions to have the Planning Commission do their job, do their role, and make sure they get it to the best level they can for the community and for the commissioners. And then we're not wasting your time maybe with a spell check, or we're hoping that between 15 people, which would be involved in that first review, we would catch a lot of the stuff that maybe the commissioners can look at it from a higher level, the city commissioners, and from a budgetary level, and from the other committees that the Planning Commission maybe is not as involved in. We wanted that to just be a higher level versus a true, technical kind of comment list. So that's something that we can look at if we just scope change or schedule, but we wouldn't gain any other time in that process. And now that we have the 6 months, we just wanted to make sure that the city commissioners had a better product than what the planning commissioners, because the planning commissioners also, it's the first time they've seen it. That's the first time they've seen the draft chapter pages, just a couple. They may want to have additional workshops. They may feel we didn't hit something in one section and we need to go back and kind of spend some more time in that. So that would open us up to several versions of
Okay, I get it. That makes sense.
Have two.
That makes sense, as long as you're prepared for, because it seems like everything we do, whether it's ordinances or whatever we're working on, seems to change a lot as we discuss it among the commission. So that's why I mentioned that, just to be aware of it.
Thank you. And we're trying to get it down to 2, planning commission. And then, yes.
And then one thing that I didn't see in there that I actually have strong feelings about is that in the last plan, and I'll just read this one sentence here, the plan's most critical element is its vision of the city of Rehoboth Beach. All the goals, policies, and actions in the plan flow from the vision as a means to move from where we are today to where we want to be in 15 to 20 years. So the visions, and there were 4 of them in the last plan. They get a chapter of their own, and they're actually, I guess, supposed to still be valid because we're only 10 years into that 15 to 20 year time frame. And I guess I would hope that this plan will also contain similar visions.
Correct. That was put in the executive summary or the beginning part. So we still have the visions of the plan, and those are still critical in the introduction chapter. And then your goals and your policies and statements flow throughout the rest of the document. So we didn't take any of those out because we want the Planning Commission to see if they're still valid, which we felt most of them were. But that way they can see if that's where they properly begin. So we did use that same exact information in the introduction chapter.
Okay, great. That's good to know. And then my last comment is, I don't think you're going to have any problem getting the extension, because for one thing, I remember that last September when we voted to extend, to go for the extension in the first place, we actually asked for a year. And
Yes.
and then the state planning office gave you 6 months, because that's the way they do it. They don't usually give the whole year. So we've already asked for the time, and I'm sure they'll give it to you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the comments.
So thank you very much, Susan Gay. I see the city manager, Sharon Lynn, on, and I wonder if you want to say anything about the extension or anything about the CDP in general. I don't see any response, so we're okay.
I think it was all good.
Yeah, it was all great. Perfect. And then Rick Perry is still on, and I'm sure he'll want to say anything. So Rick, are you available?
Yes, I am.
Thank
Debbie, great presentation. And it did flow much smoother than it did the other day when Jeff and I and you were going through it.
Thank you.
And I think it's hopefully very informative to the the members of the Planning Commission that served previously, as well as to the two new members of the Planning Commission. I know it's a lot to get familiar with and catch up on, but Debbie, that was very helpful. I was very pleased with what you presented, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you for the input to make this happen today.
And just to be complete, I see that Matt Janis is on. If you wanted to say anything here, please go now.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so with that summary, we thank you, Debbie. Keep up the good work. We appreciate everything you're doing on the mapping, and as Commissioner Gay said, these interactive electronic maps I think are really going to serve the city over the next 10 years for marketing, operational, quality, building and licensing. They're going to do a lot of good things. So this is time well spent.
Thank you very much. And just let me know who the new chair and vice chair is, and I will connect with them before the meeting.
Okay, thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so we've completed 7A. So now we will do 7B, which is a discussion of support for variances. We received, there was a letter September 23rd, 2020, concerning the Planning Commission's review of the concept for Robin Hood Restaurant. At that time, the matter went to the Board of Adjustments, and as this Planning Commission, the previous Planning Commission, and before that, has had many discussions about, the process does not work very well if people go to the Board of Adjustment first, obtain a variance, and then come to us for concept review. We should be the first groups involved, and we want to facilitate information flow from the Planning Commission to the Board of Adjustment when we've opined on a concept, and if we would support the variance. So this letter was distributed earlier, and we just wanted to have a review so that the new members of the Planning Commission and existing could have an opportunity to ask questions, voice support, criticism, whatever, and just get a general feel that folks feel this is the way we want to continue to operate. And I've asked Mr. Perry again to begin the discussion for this. Thank you.
Am I unmuted, Max?
You're good.
Oh, I'm good. Oh, okay. Yes, as the but for the new members, the other members of the Planning Commission will recall that Robin Hood came before the Planning Commission with a concept review, and the principal issues related to the size of the lots upon partitioning, because they would not be code compliant in that the frontage on the street, namely Rehoboth Avenue, would not be at least 50 feet. And there was an issue also with respect to whether or not a rectangle of 4,000 square feet would also fit within each of the partitioned lots. The Salakis family, who, or not Salakis family, the owners of Robin Hood very clearly made an argument as to why the partitioning made sense nonetheless. And we also were informed that there are numerous other properties in the area that also have frontages that are less than 50 feet. Historically, that has developed, and I think as Mr. Strange, I believe, pointed out, that it was sort of the evolution of what's happening, not just here, but worldwide. And the Planning Commission, took the view in general that it was that it was in the best interest of the city for there to be a unification of land with the users of the land. And that was the principal problem and hardship that was being faced by the Robin Hood restaurant, in that, they bought the business approximately 52 years ago. They bought the building at the time they bought the business, but they did not buy the land. So they have been leasing the land for all this time. And it's reaching the point where they feel that there are improvements that need to be made, and at a fairly substantial cost, they anticipate. And in order to obtain bank financing, it is extremely difficult, I think, as all of us would recognize, for a business owner to finance improvements to structures on land that they don't own. Particularly, I believe the current lease term ends in 9 years, is my recollection. And so I'm sure that Michael, Brian, and I, as banking lawyers, can fully understand and appreciate the reluctance of a bank to make that kind of a loan, and also understand the reluctance of the business owner to put that kind of commitment, time, and money into improving the building structure if they're simply going to leave it behind when their lease term ends. And so we generally felt, as a planning commission, that we were supportive of what the Robin Hood owners were seeking to do, and that was in alignment. We recognized they would need variances, and we had taken the position over a year ago as a planning commission that we would prefer to have applicants come to us first, present their concept reviews, and rather than, as Jeff mentioned, going to the Board of Adjustment and getting a variance and coming to us with a fait accompli, leaving us with very little latitude, that we would prefer that they come to us first. And if we were supportive, that we would lend our support before the Board of Adjustment. To that end, the Planning Commission authorized me as the chairperson then to write a letter to the Board of Adjustment in support of the variance request. and to appear personally if I chose to do so, also in support. So the letter you have before you is the letter that was sent to the Board of Adjustment, and I did appear also in person before the Board of Adjustment to support the variance applications. There were a few questions that were asked of me that I responded to, and at the conclusion of the consideration by the Board of Adjustment, they voted in favor of the variances being requested. So I suspect you will see a formal partitioning application coming back to you for your consideration. Keep in mind, however, that the fact that the Planning Commission supported the applicant's variance request was not a dispositive decision in terms of what the Planning Commission will or will not do when you are considering the partitioning application. That is still a decision that is fully within your authority, to consider. And Glenn can correct me on any of those legal aspects if necessary.
No, exactly right.
Okay, I'll ask dispositive. Can someone define it for me?
Sure. What Mr. Perry's saying is that your support for the variances in no way predetermines the decision you'll be making on the partitioning. Some might, because supportive of the variance, that is a foregone conclusion. You're going to grant partitioning, and it's not in any way. They still have the burden of proving to you everything that needs to be proved in a partitioning application.
I intuited that, but I'm happy to have the definition. Thank you. Okay, Michael.
Just a quick question. I assume that the purpose of the variances, that the ultimate goal here for Robin Hood was to actually be able to purchase the land. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, that's what I intuited, as you say.
And a partitioning
right
property.
And could I please ask, Rick, was the Board of Adjustment receptive of your being there, your recommendation? Is this something that they would appreciate having, as opposed to feeling that we're somehow imposing our will on them?
No, I think they were very receptive, to the approach the Planning Commission took.
I would think so. I would hope so. Let's put it that way.
And I think they appreciated the input, and there was no objection to them approving the variances they thought made sense.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Brian.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so I just wanted to say, I think this is a really good example of how the process should work effectively. That over the years, the Planning Commission, the Board of Adjustments have seen conflicts, where one body or the other is really prevented or hindered from dealing effectively with an application. And this is a good example where I think when the Planning Commission has a clear understanding of its role at each step, it can, meaningfully move the process along efficiently. And I think so we should really use it as a model. It does, potentially create legal liability for the city when things don't go swimmingly along the way. So if the Board of Adjustments had not supported the variances after the Planning Commission had expressed its support, then an aggrieved person would make hay of that. Or if going back to the Planning Commission, there isn't support ultimately for the partitioning after these previous two rounds, then that will be used against the city. But I think we have to accept that risk, and it's so much better to be doing this out in the open with the opportunity for public input at each step of the way than to try whatever the alternative which would be. So yeah, I did support Rick's letter, and I was glad that he was able to make the time to go to the Board of Adjustments, and that it turned out the way it did. But thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Other thoughts? Steve?
First of all, I think it worked out very well. I agree with the other comments. My only other comment is, I've said this before, the city way overuses variances, and it way overuses variances because its codes aren't up to date. And you know, variances are really not supposed to be used unless there's an extreme hardship, and we use them to waive side yards and other things. I know it's the only tool we have right now, but I'm hoping with the comprehensive development plan and some action items that deal with some modifications to our codes, zoning code, that we can limit, and I think Lisa mentioned this in the past too, we can limit the amount of variances that are needed. And, you know, I think there should be better coordination between the Board of Adjustments and our commission with regard to variances. I think this worked out very well. It is a very good pilot in terms of the process, given the limitations we have. But I definitely feel that the city needs to take some action pretty soon after we have a new comprehensive development plan to make some modifications so we don't overuse or misuse, which I believe we're somewhat doing, the variance process. Yes, I just want to make that comment.
Thanks, Steve. Anyone else? I'll ask for, since we have so few members of the public, I'll ask if anyone from the public wants to comment on this item. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
No comment. Thank you.
Okay. So we finished with that item. Now we're ready to move on to new business. And in new business, letter A, we have a review of the Planning Commission bylaws. These bylaws were updated last year under Mr. Perry's direction. Again, I've asked him to help lead us in a discussion to orient the new members and address any questions. Rick, are you available again?
Yes, I am, Jeff.
Thank you.
Back in February of this year, the Planning Commission did finally adopt amendments to the bylaws and the policies and procedures of the Planning Commission. It had been in the works for a long time. I had sort of initiated the process initially back at the time of the elections of officers in 2018. And I got charged with the responsibility, since I raised the issue of the lack of clarity and transparency in the nomination of officers, with coming up with amendments to the bylaws to deal with that. Once I dove into it, I realized that there were many inconsistencies that existed in the bylaws and the policies and procedures, and that a great deal more really needed to be done. So if you looked at a red line version of what the bylaws and policies and procedures were before and what was ultimately adopted in February of this year, it's a little bit staggering. A lot of it also, however, was due to moving some provisions of the bylaws, which really should not have been bylaw provisions, but were really policy and procedure provisions, and moving them from the bylaws into the policies and procedures to have them make sense and work with all of the other existing policies and procedures that were in place. However, one of the more significant changes to the bylaws was to restructure the mechanism for the annual election of officers of the Planning Commission, which I'm sure Jeff is going to be talking about some more afterwards. So this is sort of timely. I felt that more transparency was necessary, and that the election of officers should not be a de facto decision by one person soliciting views sort of behind closed doors of the other commissioners as to who they wanted to elect, and that everyone should be able to participate. My intent was not, however, to put in place a mechanism that would in any way harm the collegiality that I was seeking to achieve on the Planning Commission. and we made that very clear in the bylaws. So the new procedure that was adopted as part of the amended and restated bylaw includes Appendix A to the bylaws. And I don't know, Jeff, did you distribute these to the members?
We did, yes.
Okay, great. The procedure that is now set forth in the bylaws for election of officers, which by statute has to be done annually before the 31st of December, which poses some problems if new members are not appointed or reappointed on a very timely basis. But in any event, the process is that the chairperson, or in this case, it will now be Jeff as the acting chair, needs to give 15 days notice to the members of the Planning Commission prior to the date on which the election of officers is to occur. So assuming that you are planning on electing officers for the next year at your upcoming regular meeting on October 13th, I believe it is, or November 13th.
November, yeah.
Sometime at least 15 days before that date, Jeff will need to provide notice to the members that is the intended date of the election of officers. Each member of the Planning Commission is, of course, eligible to be an officer, and Appendix A is the form to be utilized by the members for nomination purposes. And Appendix A has 3 parts to it. The first part is if someone wants to volunteer for one of the 3 officer positions. I've been told that in the past, sometimes people's arms needed to be twisted to even, fill all the offices. But we were fortunate the last time around to have more than that number of people who were willing to serve in the various capacities. So you can nominate yourself for one of these 3 positions. Item 2 is a member of the Planning Commission nominating someone else for one of the offices on the Planning Commission. So if Jeff wanted to nominate Steve Kaufman to be vice chair, even if Steve didn't nominate himself for that position, Jeff could do that by filling in Steve's name at item 2B. The third category is, okay, I don't want to run for office necessarily to fill one of the 3 positions in item 1, but if there's a vacancy and no one's running for it, I would consider, running for X, Y, or Z. And so that is all done sort of individually, and the information, your selections, your nominations, do not go to Jeff, they don't go to anybody else, they go to Ann Womack as the recording secretary. Ann Womack then will compile the list of nominees and the persons in items 1 and 2, categories 1 and 2, and she will promptly, within 5 days prior to the meeting, send out to all of the members the individuals who have either nominated themselves or nominated someone else to serve in various positions. Only in the event that no one signs up for one of the officer positions in category 1 and no one has been nominated for that position in category 2, does Ann disclose that someone has volunteered to run for, to be considered for a position. So it works out quite well, I believe. It eliminates the problems that we ran into in 2018. When Susan, I know you're on probably still. Unexpectedly, Susan and I both wanted the vice chair position, and everybody was throwing up their hands and said we never had this happen before. So hopefully this established a transparent process and will continue to work well in the future. I can respond to any other questions you may have about the bylaws, Appendix A, or the policies and procedures. Policies and procedures are largely just what it says and relate more to the application process for the various types of applications that come before the Planning Commission, and when planning commissioners can act on previously presented plans or actions, and sets forth the requirements for them to either read, or in this case now listen to the videos of matters that have come before if they have not been present at the meeting. So it's a guide for you to understand how to fulfill your roles, particularly with respect to matters that have been brought forward at a meeting at which you were unable to attend, and also outlines some of the procedures that need to be followed for applicants coming before the Planning Commission. Now, contrary to the past, these bylaws and policies and procedures are on the city's website so that everyone can have access to them. It surprised me that that was not the case in the past. And so this was another move to full transparency by the Planning Commission for applicants and the citizens. Any questions?
Rick, what is going to be the timeline? Could you just tell me again? I'm sorry.
On the election of officers?
Yeah.
Yeah. Section 5 of the bylaws sets forth the timeline and procedures. So the chairperson or vice chairperson notifies each of the members of the Planning Commission at least 15 days in advance of the date of the Planning Commission meeting at which the annual election of officers will take place. So as I said, Jeff will have to notify each of you at least 15 days before November 13th, if that's the date you're going to set for election. Okay. That is the date. And also advise you, that you have the opportunity to either nominate yourself or others, and to submit Appendix A to Anne, who is the recording secretary, not later than 5 business days prior to the date of that meeting. So 5 business days before November 13th, if that's the date you all select, will be the date by which you need to submit Appendix A nominations. And then Anne will promptly, after receipt of those, notify you of who the nominees are.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I missed that.
Anything else?
Anyone else have questions for Rick?
Yes.
Steve?
Not a question. I thought we also agreed that if more than one person is nominated or nominates themselves for a particular position, that vote would be a private vote in order to save the continuity of the relationships. That's the only other thing that I think Rick did not mention.
Well, I think that what we probably in general agreed to was that the individuals could leave the room during the vote if they wanted to, but we can't, unfortunately, under the FOIA requirements that the state has imposed on us, we can't even take a secret ballot on the election of officers. That was an unfortunate obstacle that we ran into that would have made the process much better. Unfortunately, the state has not seen clear, even in this extraordinary instance, to allow secret ballots. Glenn, I know we talked about this at length. If you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, it was unfortunate. I actually did a fair amount of research on it. And yeah, bottom line is that a public body has to be public. Even if it's meaning that it can't be secret ballot in public. Members of the public are entitled to know how each member of the Planning Commission votes on a matter, including officers.
Okay, so in that case, thanks, Scott. In that case, I guess if two people had to leave the room, let's say, they would issue their vote before they left or something like that. I mean, because you got to have their vote.
Well, I think, Glenn, they could either individually vote before or vote after. I mean,
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
or they could abstain.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Although abstaining probably wouldn't be the smartest thing to do. Just a word.
You know, it's a matter of fact, you know, leaving the room is kind of silly when you think about it.
Yeah.
Because it's all these meetings are recorded, so you can see who's voting. So,
Right.
Very good. A very good.
Have to live with it. You know, that's what it is.
A very good point, Barry.
Thanks, Barry. That was a good one.
But for FOIA, it would be a much more pleasant process.
Right.
But certainly wanted to bring it out as much in the open as possible and be as transparent about the nominating process as possible, which was something that I felt fairly strongly about.
Thanks,
So, Rick, thank you for that. You talked about A and B on the agenda quite well. Does anybody have any other question on the bylaws in general, or have a question about the bylaws that Rick can help us with? Okay, we seem to be good there. So I want to go on to B for the election of officers that Rick has explained so well. I think it's critically important for the Planning Commission to have officers in place as soon as possible. And it's my intention and strong desire to send you written notice within a few days that we're going to have elections at the regular November meeting. If anyone has any objections, I'd like to hear about that now. So that's what's going to happen. You know, we need a team, and I also want to talk about who should think about being an officer, and I think that is everybody. Everybody here is highly skilled, has relevant experience. I'm not interested in putting together a slate or anything. I've talked to everybody individually. I think everybody with an interest, an ability, and a willingness would make a great officer. I alluded earlier to how helpful Rick was with mentoring and inclusion. I would hope that whoever's elected to any position follows that model for the next year. And given that we'll have elections in November, I encourage you to get your nomination sheet to Ann within 5 days before, so we can do that. And I am not at all put off by having more than one hand raised for a position. I think when we have that situation, we should give the folks a few minutes to talk about why they want to do it, and then we will have the election, and you know, we will move on. I think it's a wonderful thing to have more than one person who's willing to do that. Any other thoughts on elections? Great, thank you. And thanks for supporting November elections. I don't want to go to December. We have too much on the, we have too much coming up. So letter C, I probably did not word this exactly the best way when I first sent out the agenda, a little bit of a learning curve there. But as, well, probably everybody knows that, you know, with the projects we've reviewed in the past 2 years, this issue of underground parking being counted against the FAR. And, you know, we have this good situation where the bulk of the building is hidden below ground. It provides the parking that's required. It gets things out of sight, that folks should not be penalized for this huge investment and cost into a new building, which of course we've heard can be somewhere around $50,000 a parking space just to build. It's quite an undertaking. That information has gone back and forth with the Board of Commissioners. They've been working on the issue for some time. I hear the commissioners say that they are in agreement that it's a good thing and that it should not count against the FAR. We as a board in past iterations also agree with that. We don't see the logic. It seems like it's penalizing people for doing what we need to do. So everyone's on the same page. The reason this is on the agenda is I've spoken with Mayor Mills and some other commissioners, and we've talked about the back and forth about when things come to the Planning Commission for recommendation. And our bylaws do say a little bit about that I recommend you read over again. This issue, I think, has come to the point where some succinct policy or recommendation from the Planning Commission to the Board of Commissioners, I think, would be useful. And it could have some details about why it's important, what it does to support the CDP and the city and that sort of thing. So I wanted to kind of tee off that we would schedule this discussion and have a work product or letter, perhaps for the November agenda. Anybody have thoughts on that? Mike?
Yeah, one question before I go into more detail. I'm assuming the dialogue, and since Susan is on the line, that the commissioners are not going to be explicitly voting and at their next meeting on this issue, that they're waiting for some input from us. Is that correct, or is that a misunderstanding?
I haven't established that, but Susan, please speak to it.
Yeah, yeah, that's partially correct. We're not going to be even discussing it at the regular meeting in October, not on the agenda. I believe we are going to be discussing it, and Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong, at the November workshop. And in addition to that, we would have to set a resolution to hold a public hearing, and we couldn't even vote on that till November. But I cannot guarantee that we wouldn't be moving ahead to final version at the November workshop. Glenn, what's your thought about that?
No, I think that's probably an accurate statement. It is supposed to be the November workshop that it comes back, and the commissioners, I think, are very close on terminology for underground parking, largely because of some comments that Commissioner Gay made that have been incorporated into the ordinance now. The issue they're wrestling with a little bit is we're trying to deal with, in the same ordinance, an issue relating to the floodplain zone and how underground parking is treated in the context of floodplain ordinances. That's slowed down the underground parking ordinance a little, but I think that's going to get worked out between Dr. Trejos, who initially proposed the floodplain amendment, and the city's floodplain administrator, Denny. So that's going to get itself worked out, I think, by November. I could see them moving forward into November with setting a public hearing in December. So I do think there's largely consensus on, I mean, everybody sort of agrees that it is a bit of a penalty for something that we all seem to think, or the commissioners all seem to think is a good idea, that is underground parking. So the timeline is very much what Commissioner Gay suggests.
Okay, I think I guess my input would be as a planning commissioner, as we've gone over this in the past, that from a general perspective, it's a good thing, and just the aggregate saying that it shouldn't count against the FAR. I think the details beyond that, and Glenn, you brought up a very good example with regard to the floodplain, is there's sort of a myopic perspective on definitions that are not sufficiently expansive. And what I'm alluding to is how the Danes, in particular, and in Holland, have dealt with and created underground parking that really is actually a part of their floodplain management. So you get to kill two birds with one stone. You don't even know it's there because there's a sand dune sitting on top of it. If you look at our current rules under NEPA and other things, you wouldn't be able to do that. And yet it's absolutely one of the best things you can do that preserves open space, gives you a good dune line to protect against inundation and from flooding. And so I guess I would say that, and I must admit, I apologize, I haven't looked at what's been done so far. is that we incorporate it in such a way that it provides all of the best things that we can get from underground parking and doesn't by its very nature of how it's written into the code preclude a lot of good things that could be incorporated. I think in that case, if we look at some of our past attempts in general at our building code, it's had a lot of things that we wish weren't done that way as time went on.
So it's an interesting comment you make, because we struggled a little bit with the definition that's being proposed for underground parking area. And the definition, I'm still looking at it because it's a little bit clunky, but what it's intended to mean is that the underground parking can be underneath a building that's used for offices or residential or whatever. Like, well, I shouldn't say residential, typically excluded in the residential districts, but it also allows for underground parking that doesn't have a building above it, the main building someplace else in the lot. That underground parking is the exemption from gross floor area and the FAR. So hopefully we're incorporating the type of structure that you're talking about, Mike, that would perhaps be part of the flood management program.
You know, I'm glad we're having this discussion, because over the past 2 years that I've been on the Planning Commission, you know, we've, on a number of projects and a number of times, we've been unanimous in that we were in favor. So I sort of think, with the progress so far along, I'm reminded of what Steve Kaufman has told us, and I might ask him to repeat it again. But you know, this ordinance now, we're looking at an emergency repair to the code for something that is a bad. But the whole rewrite the code in the next 2 or 3 years, that may be when we want to do a deeper dive and actually ask to be given a recommendation. How do folks feel about that? Lee?
Well, I've got a related question, but not on this particular issue.
Oh, okay. Steve, would you?
Yeah, so what I've said in the past, and I think it's still relevant, is that the commissioners will need to take some actions pretty quickly after the new comprehensive development plan to deal with things like this FAR for underground parking and some other things. For example, we're going to adopt a mixed-use zone, which could help us avoid some variances and things like that, be applied overlay zone on a case-by-case basis. I think there will need to be some actions taken by the commissioners just to give us the time to have the full CDP enacted over time. On this particular item, I think there is consensus. The only thing that I would add is that in terms of the definition, as long as the vehicles are below grade, it would qualify as underground parking. That way you could have it on the building or you could have it under a station. It has to be, because some portion of the underground parking facility, the ramp, for example, or maybe the roof might be a little bit above it. So I think the key is to have the vehicles below grade. That's my thought.
Yeah, in fact, I'd say that's probably the major difference between the last version we worked on and the most recent, is the change from calling it subsurface, because that was so hard to define, and fully underground. And Commissioner Gossett had found a good working definition for underground parking, and we had a great deal of discussion about that and what it means. And we did, I mean, the ramp is obviously a little bit a separate issue, and I think would be excluded, but otherwise it is totally underground. It is not, with nothing exposed, so it can't be just like a partial with a screen. It has to be completely underground.
Right. What I have not seen is Glenn, is there a current version of the ordinance? Because I haven't seen it. So
yeah, it would have been appended to the agenda of the commissioners. Let me see what date they're.
Of the workshop on the 5th, I guess. Monday
right.
Workshop, October 5th.
Right.
Or if you send it to us, just send us one.
And if I send it to you, forward it to all the members of the Planning Commission.
I can. It's also embedded in the agenda.
Right.
Is it in this agenda?
No, it's embedded in the October 5th workshop meeting agenda.
Yeah, item 6B.
Okay.
Hey, Jeff.
Okay, Lee.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a related question. The issue with the underground parking was recently was together with a bigger potential zoning modification regarding floor area related to open decks and balconies. And I know that they got bifurcated and went in different directions, but I'm curious what happened to the proposed changes regarding open decks and balconies.
Sure, good question. So that's correct. The two ordinances have now been bifurcated, and the gross floor area, the broader gross floor area ordinance, not the underground parking ordinance, taken a little bit more time to get through. At the most recent workshop meeting for the commissioners, we went through a series of illustrations that we prepared to gain an understanding of what sorts of areas we're talking about. So we had homes with decks with railings, homes with decks or porches with roof above them, or with living structure above them, and went through all the different variations. And Matt Janis, the building official, described what is counted and not counted in the residential district as gross floor area. So the direction that ordinance is taking is now looking to a definition of rail, guardrail, and railing to describe what areas, to help describe which of those outdoor areas get counted. You might remember part of what got the Board of Adjustment, or part of what the Board of Adjustment relied upon when it made its decision affirming the building official, is that they agreed that could, in railings, guardrails, in certain instances, could be considered exterior walls. And in the residential reviews that had been done previously, those areas typically were not included, or the railings and guardrails were not considered exterior walls. But under the Board of Adjustment determination, the residential side of the licensing felt as though they now needed to include those areas that had railings around. So by including a definition of guardrail and railing, and specifically excluding it, or making clear that it's not to be used as an exterior wall for purposes of determining gross floor area, that allows the residential side of building and licensing to go back to reviewing plans the way they did prior to those Board of Adjustment hearings.
And it is only for residential, that ordinance.
Correct.
Are you considering the commercial area balconies for hotels, or is that not be moving forward now?
The commissioner's not most recent, but the commissioner's direction at this time is that they only want to deal with the residential district.
Because I noticed that in a Board of Adjustments hearing, the hotel on, I believe, Baltimore Avenue was again rejected in terms of for balconies.
That's right. So there's the proposed hotel at 19 Baltimore. There was a rehearing at the Board of Adjustment, and at that rehearing, the Board of Adjustment again affirmed its previous decision, thereby affirming the building official's determination that those spaces on a balcony do count as gross floor area, and will continue to count after the if the ordinance passes in its current form, since it only deals with residential.
See, that's another reason why the commissioners have to take some action in the commercial area with regard to a mixed type of property. It's unfortunate, I feel.
Yes, Steve, and I think you're teeing up subjects like mixed use, where, if that should be a priority in the next year, we're definitely going to be called upon to offer some recommendations. Okay. Anything else on that topic? So we're I think we've decided that we haven't changed our position. Oh, you know what? I didn't call on Mr. Perry in the public.
That's okay. Thanks, Jeff. I just had a question. Glenn, is there any consideration being given with respect to the subsurface parking of excluding from the FAR the ingress egress ramp area? It's obviously something you have to have for underground parking.
Yeah, the current definition that's offered, the ramps all be excluded from gross floor area. So unless, like Mr. Coffin suggested, that for some reason you are, above surface for a long period of time going into the parking garage area, that ground area of course will not be excluded. But under the current definition, I think that the ramp area, as long as at grade heading into or as long as at some grade going into the parking, underground parking, would be excluded.
Okay. Well, it would seem to me to be a much simpler way to address the situation by simply excluding the ramp in its entirety.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I'm not even sure that it's clear under the current definition that the ramp would be excluded. I would just take another look at that. Just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay, so for that topic, we're paying close attention to the next developments, and I would say that we are in agreement, and if called upon, that we would consider it, but it's not an agenda item at this point in time. So let's move on to item 9A in the building inspector's report. And okay, I see they're online. Go ahead.
I believe the building inspector's report was forwarded to you all, and I'm here to entertain any questions that you may have for it.
Any folks have any questions?
Nope.
I see a lot of heads saying no. So thank you so much for attending our meeting.
Jeff?
Oh, Lee, okay.
Hey, Matt, a question for you. What impact does this issue of the floor area definitions of being up in the air, how has that affected people's plans that they're filing?
So they are still submitting as
are people taking decks off their houses because
they are recognizing that we are counting those, so it is limiting the sizes of the houses further. But the majority of people already are they're already, I don't want to call it penalized, but with the 14-foot rule, with these other things, the coverage rules. I mean, to begin with, it's not good money sense to build a house in Rehoboth and put it all decks and everything. So they're still focusing on the bedrooms and the interior living spaces and the more, I hate to call it rentable spaces, but that's exactly what it is. And also they're looking more towards outdoor spaces such as courtyards and the like. So I think there's a trade-off of the second floor decks versus like some patios and some outdoor kitchen scenarios that a lot of people are putting in now.
Yeah. Okay, great, thanks.
Sure, thank you.
Anybody else for Matt? Okay, thank you, Matt.
Sure, you guys have a great weekend.
Okay, we appreciate your attendance.
Thank you.
And then I guess we'll have the city solicitor's report. I don't know, Glenn, if you have any more to add.
Yeah, well, what I update you on is the appeals of the clear space and spotlight site plan approvals. So the appeals was filed, as you know. Working with the officers, we prepared and filed a motion to dismiss those appeals. I think it's important that the decisions of this body be maintained and people be able to rely upon them. So I filed a motion to dismiss those appeals. Dean Lawson, on behalf of Clear Space and Spotlight, also filed motions or a motion to dismiss the action. The planning motion is largely based upon a standing issue. There's 21 appellants in the group of individuals who brought this matter forward. It's not clear to me under the filings as to who the real appellant is, who's representing the appellant, if they have representation, what standing they have. Standing is all about a question of, has a person suffered a concrete particularized harm based upon the action that's taken. And as we know, for example, one of the appellants doesn't even live in the city anymore. And I find it hard that an individual situated in that way have standing to file an appeal on the matter. So we've also appealed on the basis that they didn't, we've also filed a motion to dismiss on the basis that we don't believe they perfected their appeal. That is, this body made two decisions, one decision as to the Spotlight application, one decision as to the Clear Space application. They only filed one filing fee of $150 for your two decisions. There are 21 appellants. And in my mind, that's 21 separate appeals, or maybe 42 appeals since you made two decisions. I think for a lot of reasons, the procedurally, the way they've approached it raises issues of perfecting the appeal and issues of standing. So we filed motions to dismiss based upon on those bases. The appellants now have filed, I want to say 5 different motions as well, trying to do different things. 5 motions that will be heard, I guess, before the application is heard on the merits. Their motions, one of them, you should know, a motion to qualify me from representing the Planning Commission. Is there a view that because I worked with the building official in determining that the applications were code compliant and could come to you, that I've assisted the city manager in different matters, and that I did the city commissioners on matters that touch upon Clear Space, that I'm prohibited from representing this body in the appeal? My view has always been that when there's an adversity of parties, then I need to step away. So for example, when the appeals were filed that will go before the Board of Commissioners, obviously because I had represented this body below, I can't then represent the Board of Commissioners in adjudicating an appeal based upon a decision by the body that I represent below. And that's why commissioners, city commissioners, have outside counsel on these appeals. So that's one that I think we'll be able to deal with. They've filed a motion based upon former Commissioner Mark Hunker's participation, because if you recall, there was a question about his eligibility to be a commissioner. I won't share with you our responses aren't due until next Friday. So we've talked through our legal responses to all of these. I won't share public forum, but we've got responses obviously to share all of their motions. There's a motion that relates to site visits by members of the Planning Commission and whether your individual site visits to the area were appropriate, and whether for some reason those who visited the site should have been disqualified. I think it's interesting that, there's only a couple ways to get into the city, and one of them is by the circle. So a lot of you pass the site 2 or 3 times a day. So it's hard to avoid a site visit, but be that as it may, we'll respond to that. They have another, that's the one asking me to recuse. Then there's another that deals with, if you recall, the Planning Commission suggested that Clear Space and Spotlight should meet with their neighbors because the neighbors had some concerns about the proposed project. Well, when they did that, the motion here suggests that Clear Space and Spotlight didn't give the Planning Commission a full picture of what occurred at the meeting, and they suggest that you should have had a fuller complement of everything that went on. They also suggest that a few members of the Planning Commission attended that meeting. They don't allege that there was an exchange between members of the Planning Commission and the presenter there, but there's an allegation that the members of the Planning Commission should not have attended. All of these are things that I feel, are largely attempts to kind of gum everything up and make it more difficult to get to a hearing on the merits. So we're on a pretty fast schedule though. The schedule, grab my calendar real quick. The schedule is that all of these motions will be responded to by this week from today on the 16th. Then on the 22nd of October, we are required to submit our opening submission for the hearing on the merits, if we get to a hearing on the merits. Then on the 29th, the city commissioners will hear oral argument on all the motions that have been filed. So you all will have, everybody opportunity to watch that. That'll be a public meeting. So hopefully they will hear and perhaps decide, one or more of them. My hope would be that they would hear the motion that I filed and dismiss the matter altogether at that on that date. But I'm not certain that they're going to get to that point. So that happens on the 29th, and then my recollection is that our hearing on the merits is in November sometime, though I don't know exactly if I can find that. Let's see. Yeah, that's on November 12th is the argument. If we get to a hearing on the merits, that'll be November 12th. So that's the update. We've got a little bit of work we're doing on this. I should have, and I guess I didn't send each of you the final motion file to dismiss. So I can do that. So y'all have, at this point, that's a public document in any event. And are we, if you're able to answer, are we loading any of these motions or any of the materials being filed in place on the website?
Not at this time. I'm waiting to hear from Max on that.
Okay. I should mention that because we're under such a kind of a tight schedule, I've been working with the Planning Commission officers on responses, filings. It's sort of been my approach recently on these tight schedules to take it on in that fact, to the extent there's a large decision, a piece of legal strategy making that the officers feel we take it to the Planning Commission body as a whole. We'll do that in an executive session, but I'm only mentioning it because one of the appellants raised the issue that you're not being fully informed as clients move through this, this vicious schedule. So unless anybody objects, I'm going to continue to work with Point on these matters until he says this is something that is of significance that we need to take to the whole body. Any objection?
No, Glenn, I'm glad you said that. I'm going to ask you a question in a moment, but
okay.
I also want to state publicly that I will ask one or more members of the commission who are attorneys to work with me in this interim period because I don't want to be outnumbered with attorneys. Even though I know you're representing us, I want to make sure if I have to ask a question of someone, I can get two opinions.
Good.
He's doing a good job. Really, he is.
Yeah. So I mean, this is. Thank you for that summary, Glenn. It's very informative, and that's a very aggressive list of dates there. So I can see you have your work cut out for you. One other thing, if you wouldn't mind talking about it for a minute, for the new members, but for everyone. I know that you do an annual ethics FOIA participation thing, and I don't know if you have something in mind, but I wanted folks to know when that would be available to them. And one of the things that brought that to mind, besides the discussion I've had, is that you mentioned the site visit. And of course, some of the training that I have explains the rules around the site visit. And I want to declare that I did not leave the public sidewalk. I did do a site visit and look carefully, but I did not leave the sidewalk, and I was alone.
Perfect. Perfect. So the annual ethics training, that largely gets established by the city manager when she thinks it's time, where we've had enough turnover that it's time to conduct another one. And she'll speak with the mayor and determine whether they want to do one. So there's nothing on the books right now. If you wanted, as chair of the planning commission, to have a session that's largely directed at the planning, focus on issues that might arise for members of the planning commission, we can do that as part of an agenda item or as a special meeting. You know, so but as to the annual one that's typically for all boards and committees, that's nothing's on the books right now for end of 2020 or 2021.
Any other questions for Glenn?
Brian, welcome
Okay,
back.
Brian?
Okay, I got it. I was having trouble with my mute button. Thanks very much, Jeff, and thanks, Glenn, for that comprehensive update. I was going to ask the question about why the documents are not posted, and I understand now from Ann that that's still being looked into. But I do think it would be really helpful and important to post these materials for the public to be able to see, since a big part of the public comment over the 2 years of the applications process for this development was about the lack of transparency, right? And to now be in the almost 2 months into an appeals process without any of the documents available to the public as a matter of routine is concerning, and I think it's going to just it's just not helpful. The other thing that I heard, though, is all of this motions practice, and that's the problem with lawyers, isn't it? I think I trust that the decision of the Planning Commission has excellent defenses on the merits, and I just wish that the hearing of the mayor and commissioners could focus on that. And I really do regret that we're now mired in motions practice, where this commission is being portrayed, and well, I guess is trying to shut down the right of people to be heard by their elected mayor and commissioners. I don't think that ideal. I don't think that's where we should be. I think we should be supporting public, transparency, openness, public comment, and that includes the right of people to appeal to their mayor and commissioners. And I don't, I just think strategically and as a matter of optics, it's just really bad form for us to be using all of these lawyerly tactics as if we don't have confidence in the merits. So I would not support, if I had a chance, I would not support that motion to dismiss on standing grounds and filing fee grounds, and just say, let's get on with the merits.
So I hear you, and I understand that concern, but when you boil it down, in some ways, look, aren't they arguing that this commission messed things up procedurally? I mean, that's one of the main arguments, is that procedurally this commission just fumbled the ball, and so our response in large ways is, haven't you? So I hear you though, and I guess we shouldn't get into much of a discussion about our strategy in this open session. But any other questions?
Michael has a question.
No. Sorry.
Oh no, I mean Michael Bryan.
Yes. Glenn, could you just educate me briefly, your motions, who rules upon these motions?
So the adjudicative body is the city commissioners. So the city commissioners will meet and hear oral argument, and will make a decision on the motions.
Okay.
So,
and then make the ultimate decision on the appeal, on the merits.
Correct.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Steve?
with regard to the conversation we just had, it is my understanding that we'll be filing our brief or our position on the merits on the 29th. That's correct?
That is correct. I'm sorry. On the
yeah. So I don't have an issue with this procedural motion of standing. In my practice as a land use lawyer, that was a very significant thing over the years. Unless you were aggrieved separately from the public at large, you didn't have standing in most cases. And so I don't have a problem with that motion. I don't know about all these other motions and the back and forth there. But I do agree with the new commissioner that we should get the merits before the commissioners as soon as possible. And that, so I'm very supportive of the motion that's going forward.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Glenn, for that update. We appreciate your participation.
Sure.
So the last items we have are future planning commission meetings. And as we discussed earlier, on November 13th, we'll have our next regular virtual meeting. At that meeting, we will have an update on the CDP, and we will have a better idea of what the timeline looks like. I'll ask Anne, I believe we are going to have one or more partitioning applications. Can you speak to that, Anne?
I actually have 2 partitioning applications sitting in my office that have been timely submitted. One is for 46 Columbia Avenue, and the other one is for 54 and 56 Rehoboth Avenue, Robin Hood Restaurant. They're both partitioning.
Okay, so it's here. Great, thank you, Anne.
Jeff, just to confirm, that 11/13 meeting, is that at 2 o'clock?
Okay, so the very next thing, thank you, Rachel. The very next thing I was going to say is CDP and 2 partitionings. As folks know, our regular meeting is at 3 o'clock, and during this virtual meeting time, we try to be respectful of the staff time and not drag them into the evening, and that includes everybody, including the IT folks that are supporting us. So today, 2 o'clock is we're pretty much on target. With two partitionings and significant CDP work, and maybe 1 or 2 other discussions. Folks think we should leave it at 2 or perhaps start at 1 or 1:30?
1:30, please.
Is that possible for everybody?
It is for me.
It is for me.
I didn't hear any objections. Rachel, what do you think?
I'll do 1:30. It's fine.
Okay, thank you. So we'll set.
Would we need to get on 15 minutes before that, like we did today, rather than half an hour before?
Yeah, the start time would be 1:30 instead of 2. And if you're feeling competent, and anytime you want to get on at this point is fine for the folks that are feeling confident about the technology. Great. Okay. So I have a number of very quick things that I wanted to cover. Glenn already covered them. The one thing about ethics FOIA training. I wanted to bring to everyone's attention, and I mentioned it very early in the meeting, that Mayor Mills has asked me to prepare a monthly report for the Board of Commissioners in writing, and ideally, when possible, to be present to answer questions or even present a brief summary. I think that's a great idea. It's something that I've agreed to do to the interim, but as we're having election of officers, this is sort of a new responsibility for folks to be thinking about. So we may want to have a little bit of a division of labor on this idea. Just wanted you to be aware of that. I also wanted to bring to everybody's attention, the new members, that the University of Delaware Institute for Public Administration has a great program with a certificate for planning education. It's something that the city has supported in the past. Given COVID and the financial situation, I don't know if the decision has been made, but I've lobbied the mayor to continue this. I think this is a great program. It really gives you a great basis in planning in the state of Delaware. And you learn things that I mentioned earlier, like there are rules about site visits and you don't just wander around. You can really hurt the process if you do that sort of thing. So Anne usually sends out a notification, and I think when she knows something, she'll let us know. But I would encourage people to participate in that. So one of the things. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Explain about the site visit problem. I'm totally unfamiliar with that.
Oh, well, Glenn, do you mind saying something?
Well,
It's, since it's the subject of these motions, I think probably in open session is not the time for me to.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll figure out how to structure this and get information to everybody. Maybe a brief special session or something. I'll work on that as an assignment. Thank you for bringing it up. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to mention, Debbie had brought to our attention this summer about Denerec's involvement in Delaware's climate action plan. And they just completed a series of workshops. They had 4 workshops. I signed up for them. They are virtually available now. You can participate, you can watch them. They had a workshop on minimizing greenhouse gas emissions. I attended that. It was amazing. They had maximizing resilience to sea level rise. I was not able to attend that, but I'm going to listen to it. The third one is maximizing resilience to increased temperatures. I did attend that. Again, the participation was amazing. The presentation, they really did a great job. And the fourth one was maximizing resilience to heavy precipitation and flooding. I'd like to send a link to everybody so that you can easily access that. But there were many people participating. I saw names that I recognized from Sussex County. Not as many as compared to the Northern County, but that's okay. And anybody we can get involved in this is good. But all of these topics are important to the Planning Commission and land use. And I think we should be very aware that, Delaware has a climate action plan, and it has some very significant recommendation over the next decade. And Commissioner Gay mentioned, what's the vision for 10, 20, 30 years? What do we have in there? Some of these, I think environmental things have really come to the surface. And I think we want to be very clear about the vision we have in the CDP, that it really reflects the decades of shifting to renewable energy, for instance. And I'm going to ask for a volunteer to look at the city's website for the Planning Commission. I took a peek at it. I didn't like what I saw because there was a bunch of inconsistencies. There's a beautiful picture of Joyce and Mike that looks very professionally shot. And there's no picture of the rest of us, for one instance. I just want to get an eye or two, somebody to look at it, and then we'll work with the city's communication director to figure out how we can make it as good as possible. And that kind of brings up the last thing I'm going to ask Glenn to talk about, which is FOIA, just very briefly. One of the things I did not do when I joined the Planning Commission is create an email just for the Planning Commission. And, as time goes on and we get into matters that we're into now, with Clear Space and Rehoboth Spotlight, where, we may have to produce records. it's a matter of great simplicity, and can save a lot of search time and effort. And also, this summer, I don't know exactly what happened, but folks were under the impression that they could not get a message to the Planning Commission members. We have, that is done through Ann Womack, the city secretary, who distributes everything, but people were looking for people's individual messages. Folks who are still working, like Rachel and I, there's, I know I do with the government, we have rules about you can't use government equipment or time or anything. And when people start grabbing onto your work identities and sending you planning commission stuff, that could cause problems. So I think our website could be a little bit more clear in terms of how to communicate with us. So I would just like to help the city make that a little bit better. Does that make sense? And is anybody interested in doing that?
I'm happy to help you, Jeff.
Thank you, Rachel.
I have a marketing background.
And Glenn, do you want to say anything about the FOIA issue and keeping records clear, separate?
Yeah, I mean, the real thing to consider and be aware of is that we do from time to time get requests for records that are subject to the Freedom of Information Act. And all of you, being appointees to a city committee, those records that you maintain, whether they be on your private computer or your work computer, or however you maintain them, they are subject to requests for records. So it is much easier, as Jeff suggested, if you have a way of keeping those records in one location, one searchable location, so that if somebody requests, for example, all email correspondence between a member of the Planning Commission and Commissioner A between, on a 2-week period, that it's easier for you to search for those records and produce them and make them available, because we are not something that we can not seriously. And as the city grows and the bigger and bigger projects come forward, and there's more and more projects, that those issues of FOIA and getting records become more and more important. So on the records retention side, it is important and will make your lives a lot easier if you have a way to easily search your files when those records requests come in. There is a whole side of FOIA that deals with how you communicate with each other and what the limitations are, and we could have a long discussion about that. Most of you have heard me talk on it before. Michael, not Mike Strange, but Michael Bryan. I don't know if you've got a background in any kind of public involvement that subjected you to open meetings laws. Okay, shaking your head, yes. So we do need to be careful about communicating via email or otherwise in a way that reaches a quorum of individuals. Jeff, some people, sometimes we get concerned about any that has all the members of the Planning Commission on it. Obviously, the chairperson can send out a passive one-way communication that maybe informs the entire Planning Commission on some work that he's done with Debbie File on the CDP, for example. There's no problem with that. It only becomes a problem when then the next email comes back and you start to have exchanges with a quorum or more on the email. Start to conduct business. That becomes. So that's part though, Jeff. Usually when I do the annual ethics, it's also a FOIA, refresher as well. So we should probably look to get that scheduled at some point now that we have had some turnover.
Right. Thank you, Glenn.
Sure.
Excuse me, Glenn.
Yeah, Ann.
As a matter of fact, today in passing, I spoke with Mayor Mills and had suggested that we set up the FOIA and ethics along with another presentation that needs to be done too, because we haven't done it in 2-3 years, is the active shooter presentation. I highly recommend that for everybody because of the volatility of the state of the United States right now.
Yep, good call. Right. So somebody
I'm waiting to, I'm actually waiting to hear back. Like I said, I spoke with Mayor Mills. I'll be talking with Chair next week on it. And then I'll try to get something set up with various meeting dates so I can hone in on a particular one, possibly just for the Planning Commission.
Great.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Ann and Glenn. Steve Kaufman, are you saying something?
You're muted.
You're muted.
Okay. I was going to, does that mean that we're going to have a special executive session on FOIA and this active shooter for the commission with you, Glenn? Is that how that will work, or how will this work?
So generally they're in open public forum. It's not an executive session. And we'll talk through the general things that arise on the ethics side and the Freedom of Information Act side. If there are specific questions about some pending litigation that relates to FOIA, then we could do that in an executive session. But generally, I mean, when we do these annual, it's almost like a training session more than anything. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks.
And the very last item on my list, we had talked at our last meeting about having some sort of discussion of businesses leaving the city. And I did not get that on the agenda to Ann in time. So I apologize for that. That was my error. I would like to consider that as an item for November, but I wanted to make sure that everybody still wants to have it. And how I think we should approach it, if people feel comfortable with this, is first having a discussion about the structure, like what kind of information are we going to put together, and then how are we going to compile and present it. And that's what I would propose to do in November. But I'm open to hearing anything that you all have to say about that.
I to have this presentation. I'm not, we had talked about maybe having Main Street come in, or, a group that could talk to us about, kind of the state of the affairs, really. It feels like there is a lot of concern around businesses and restaurants in Rehoboth. And I don't know that we as a group have actually had much visibility, honestly, to that. So I do think we should have that topic on our agenda.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it, and my thought was that our first discussion about it would be more kind of strategic on who we want to involve and what's the best way to get the information that we need, and then how to present it once we have it. So kind of strategy session first, and then
I think that's an excellent suggestion, Lee. So I will put that on the November agenda. That's great.
Jeff?
Yes.
Is this something that we included in the CDP, maybe?
Well,
businesses and economic challenges that we might face in the future.
So that information, there is information in the CDP already from the Chamber, Main Street, other sources. I think this is more specific, perhaps. We'll get to this in the strategic session that Lee's recommending in November. But I think this is more strategic in terms of us understanding current issues in, just what's happening with the businesses. Maybe that very well could be a part of it, but this would not be information gathering for the CDP necessarily, although it may influence some of the comments we put into it. I don't know yet.
I listened to the commissioner meeting, which was the swearing in meeting, which is going back now about, I guess, 3 weeks. And I thought when the conversation around businesses and restaurants came up, and kind of looking forward in special workshops that the commissioners and the mayor were going to do, that someone was assigned on the commissioner to be able to represent or actually go out and talk to the businesses. I'm not quite sure who that was. I don't know if Susan Gay is still on this line or not, but maybe she knows, and it would be great to understand what they gathered, as well.
Yeah, so that's a great suggestion. I'll send an email to Mayor Mills and find out who that person is, and then I'll bring that information to November's meeting, because they're I think we want to coordinate, not duplicate.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so does anybody else want to bring announcements or news forward? Michael Strange.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to bring up a topic. I've had the discussion explicitly on this topic with Glenn a while back on 5G implementation in Rehoboth Beach, and I can't get into a lot of that at the moment, generalization, but I don't know if folks have been looking at the Cape Gazette in the last several weeks with regard to what's happening in Dewey Beach with regard to Verizon's 5G installations, and they're putting 15 of them up. And the people in Rehoboth in Dewey Beach are absolutely beside themselves. And I don't know if anyone's ridden through there lately. I had to, because of my heart condition, I haven't been traveling much. But in the photograph in the Cape Gazette, it can only be described as an utter defecation on the city's landscape and urban form, and it's completely absurd. Part of the problem is, in that particular case, is that Route 1 that goes through Dewey is owned by the state, obviously, and almost all the streets in Dewey Beach are owned by the state. And under the Wireless Act of 2017, the authority was given to DelDOT to approve these installations. The problem is that, in my expert opinion, and I can say that in this case legitimately, DelDOT approved them without having a total understanding of all the appropriate laws that are beyond the one enabling act that they have, meaning the feds with their report and order of 2018, the Communications Act of 34, and in fact, the CDP within Dewey Beach. But Verizon's putting in 15 of them. AT&T is, I can't remember them, they're putting in. There's 3 other companies that want to put them in. And they're beside themselves because it's destroying essentially the urban form that they have. And they could have been installed on existing poles in the DelDOT right away, and they're not. And it appears that it's being done that way, so it basically reduces the operating cost of installation and the run rate cost, because they don't have to pay the fees to Delmarva Power to put them on the Delmarva Power poles. Now, why should we be concerned? If you also read in the Cape Gazette, AT&T and Verizon want to put in a significant number of these structures in Rehoboth Beach as well, and they already have. One of which was put in by AT&T at the end of my street in the area of the beach. And in my opinion, it violates the CDP. And I think there's some other issues which I've discussed with Glenn, but inappropriate to discuss here. It's a brewing problem, and it's up and down the state. They also installed one of these things in front of the life-saving station down the coast, about 10 foot away from an existing pole that Delmarva has installed. So they're destroying the visual landscape with these, and there's approximately 15 more going to go in along Route 1. So it's really an absurd situation, and it's being done under the cover of an act, which unfortunately they can do here in Rehoboth Beach. And I know the city is considering restructuring our ordinance, but there's some real threats, and there's some real issues which I think the methodology that the companies Verizon, AT&T have utilized, they've taken advantage of the ignorance of unfortunately, folks, and it reaches the point where it almost could constitute fraud. I've done a lot of research on that from the legal definition. And it seems that they're pulling the wool over a lot of people's eyes, unfortunately. So I think it's a subject that I'd love to put a couple 3 pages together for presentation to this committee, because it really is having a dramatic negative effect on our landscape. And that's it.
So can you tell us a bit about the urgency, Mike? Is this something you'd like to do in November or sometime in the next 3 months?
Well, our schedule is quite full from November, and I think at this point, and I'll ask Glenn if it's acceptable, because it can be put in the public record, is if I do what would amount to a 2 or 3 page short brief from an urban planning standpoint of what's going on and the law and the impact on us, because it has a tremendous impact on urban form. Now, I mean, we have electric and utility poles, and you know, we've dealt with them for 100 years. What's happening right now, though, is these things are going in what's perceived under the law, and there's already been several cases that have been litigated, the Ninth Circuit. I don't want to get into all the details, but some things are happening now which are completely inappropriate, and towns are almost defenseless against it only because they don't have sufficient knowledge. And that's really what I want to do. And I think as a planning commission, we should be aware of it, because the telecommunications providers are doing this at a high rate of speed because they're all trying to one-up each other so they can be in the strongest competitive position. It's strictly about the finances. It has not, they really could give a rat's ass about how it affects the community specifically. So if that's acceptable, could I do a couple page that would go into the public record that I would present to that for the planning commission can look at, and then we'll schedule an actual formal meeting at a later date. Is that acceptable, Glenn, to do something like that?
Yeah, you can do that. It's informational, to, you know, a matter of awareness, and sure.
Okay, that's how we'll handle it. Thank you, Mike. So I guess this would be a last call for any other topics. And perhaps I should have a last call for the public, whether there's anybody who wanted to speak more about any subject, and I neglected to call upon the public. I don't see the microphones going off. So I think it's that magic time when we entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Okay. Second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Ann.
Yeah.
Welcome, Brian. Welcome back.